Hello everybody. I did say on social media yesterday that I would do a YouTube video to explain in detail about what I consider to be one of the biggest scandals that has hit the animal world in Morocco and the likelihood consequences. So I'd just like to say a little bit about this channel first. You know that I was the founder of a refuge in Marrakesh which cares for malnourished, abandoned, disabled equines. I don't need to say any more about that at the moment. But what I do need to tell you is that we're registered in Morocco as a charity, an association, and in England as a charity. And I am limited on social media as to what I can say in the name of the charity, because if I was going to formally complain about another association or particularly another charity in the UK, I would have to inform the Charity Commission and so on and so on. What I say must be the truth, otherwise I might be liable for a charge of defamation. Here I have a little more freedom. I've called this channel on YouTube The Donkey Barrister. And I'm speaking very much as a retired barrister, and of course I'm interested in the law and very interested in the law in Morocco, and we have always striven to work within the law in Morocco. But I have a little more liberty to say things that are quite personal to me, because this isn't just a charity channel, it is my own channel. I've called it The Donkey Barrister, and I to some extent, I may be repeating someone who I admire hugely, who is on YouTube, is also a member of the bar, but is still practicing, called the Black Belt Barrister. I found him to be a huge inspiration in the way that he tackles everyday events and gives advice on the law. And he really spurs me on a daily basis to continue to be outspoken and do the right thing. So let's get back to this scandal. Lots of people will know, internationally as well, that just over 10 years ago, an association was established in the Agadir region, outside of Agadir. It was called Moroccan Animal Aid. And the founders were two young women. One was French, the other was Australian. They were not residents, and for quite a long time, they operated without being formally recognised as an association in Morocco. And that is acceptable when you're starting, because it took us quite a while to be registered, to be accepted, and to put ourselves in a position where we complied with all the association law here and the charitable law in the UK. And then after a while, I think in sort of fairly recent times, I can't remember when, they became registered as an association in Morocco. Now, my inquiries tell me that in order to do that, they couldn't be trustees of that association, like I'm a trustee of the association here, because I live here, I'm resident. They weren't residents, and the trustees of any association in Morocco must be resident, and I hope very soon is coming into effect that a European or a non-Moroccan will not be allowed to set up an association unless they're resident and have been here for quite a while to show their commitment to the country. I'll explain why as this video continues. And in order to do that, the people who were trustees on the board were young men, and they were men who already worked for them. Mistake number one. And this should have been picked up immediately by local officials. You cannot be a trustee of an association and work for that association. So at Georgia, none of the team could be a trustee because they are paid members of staff. And of course, I have no qualms about saying this. They became a front for what the two women were doing. And anyone who sort of looked at that association over a period of time will see when they were asking for donations, they were online most days saying, gosh, we need donations now. We need donations to pay the staff. We need donations to pay the vet. We need donations for food. And if you looked behind those donations, there was a PayPal link. If you followed the PayPal link through, it went into Australia. And it went into a personal account. It didn't go into a charitable account in Australia, which actually is unlawful in Australia, but there we go. And also, it used to go into other private accounts as well. The local people, I find this amazing, but I'm discovering now that the local people, over a period of time, were quite frightened of these two people. And I couldn't understand why. And if I move on to more recent times, I was approached by a lot of people in the area, ex-staff, ex-volunteers, ex-supporters, who had photographic evidence of what had been happening at Moroccan Animal Aid. First of all, I'll tell you this. The photographs I was sent, it isn't a question of me going public because I somehow had a vendetta against MAA or I didn't like them personally. I have to say, the photographs that I saw, no one would have stopped me going public because they were horrendous. And the fact that so many animals were kept here in Morocco in captivity and were in such a dreadful state, that can be verified by going to an Instagram and a Facebook page that was set up called Moroccan Animal Abuse, and it's exposing very much what was happening at Moroccan Animal Aid. That is nothing to do with me. I am not directly involved in that page or that Instagram, although they will replicate some of the posts that I've made, and I'm quite happy for that to happen. Of course, once I did start to go public, that there was quite an outcry. First of all, there was an outcry from Fanny and Lucy, who were the founders of the association, who did go public, and they said they accepted the photographs were authentic. That's very important. They said that they were under so much pressure and it had grown so quickly and rapidly, and they had so many animals that it was inevitable that they couldn't care properly for all of them. I don't think that's a good excuse, but there we go. But then as it unfolded, I then realised that these two individuals, I did know before, but I hadn't paid too much attention, I honestly hadn't, had both been deported. And they were deported, clearly it was on authorisation from Rabat, where the government is based. Because Fanny firstly was deported, and when the police went to take her to the airport, she made a video, and it looks pretty horrendous, but you have to make your own judgment about that. And of course, the people were in plain clothes. And if you remember, if you look at that video, Fanny said as they were trying to come in, she said they asked for her passport, and she said she would take her passport to the local gendarmerie whom she knows and produce it. Clearly that didn't happen. They insisted on taking her straight to the airport, and she was deported. She subsequently tried to come back into Morocco, and she wasn't permitted to do so. Lucy, who was in Australia at the time, went to the UK. I know the person she was staying with. And once she heard this had happened, she went with her new baby to the airport at Stansted, where she was met at the departure point by the police in Stansted, who said she was not permitted to travel to Morocco. Now, if you think sensibly about that, for the police in the UK to know that that shouldn't happen, there was clearly communication at national level between Morocco and the UK, and it was taken very seriously. From then on in, those two people continued to ask for donations for the animals they had left in Morocco, and purported to say that MAA still existed. That was not true, because the trustees of the MAA Association in Morocco dissolved the association and the bank account, and what money was left in a bank account here, because some money did come into Morocco, was used to pay off debts that had been left, or some of them. But some of those, I'll call them boys. I'm old enough, I think. I'm 81 and they are all in their 20s. So to me, they're almost like my grandchildren. They were very committed to the animals they'd been looking after. And they continued to go to the three places where animals were being kept. And MAA had taken land, 2 pieces of land down in Oria near to the river, one for horses and donkeys and the other for dogs. And they also had another place, I can't quite remember the name of it, but that can always be checked. And they were purporting to collect money to bring it into Morocco to keep those animals. Now, in my view, and I suppose this is a criticism, and I'm very, very cautious ever to criticise the government. There's a great difference between decisions that are made at government level and how that is exercised at local level. But I am going to express a view, a personal opinion, that when they were deported, the local gendarmerie should have confiscated the computer that was left behind and made it perfectly clear that they no longer existed, and should have made provision in some way to care for those animals. But as I say, they persisted in continuing to ask for help. I hear from the staff that they often were not paid. I hear also, and this is very upsetting, that they lived in the staff house, and sometimes they'd not been paid for so long. They were actually taking rice from the animal stock at the shelters to feed themselves. I personally find that shocking that people are driven to do that. I'm not blaming them. They had to live and they had to continue to look after these animals. As soon as I was asked to assist local people, I've done that faithfully. Of course, I got a backlash from people who would have supported MAA. I got a backlash saying that because of my actions, the donations they were receiving were reduced. That would have happened anyway, because people who did follow them were hearing information from other sources as well and were making their own decisions. I am going to be quite open about this now, that I made contact with the local, there's a fly, I'm sorry about that, the local authorities in the area. I made an application to the court to ask the Prosecutor General for permission to go in for us to save the equines, because as you probably know, we are only registered and licensed at Jargier to take donkeys, mules, horses, equines, not dogs, but was very happy to work with other associations who would be prepared to help in connection with the dogs. I understand that I'm very outspoken and I'm seen sometimes as very difficult, so be it. And perhaps other people are not willing to be as outspoken as I am, and I don't criticise them for that. We made an approach to the local Qaid in the area. I went down with my manager Ayub, and we saw him with some of the ex-staff. He was quite charming and very good to us, and told us that we must get permission to go in from the Wali. But we were then very quickly advised we should go to the Diwan first. And the Diwan is between the Qaid. The Qaid is a very local official. I suppose if you were in the UK, you might be looking at the mayor. And then you have other officials until you get to the head of the council. And in the countryside, there are Diwans who are senior to the Qaids. And we tried to see him that day. He wasn't there, but he was very anxious that we should go back very quickly. And Ayub went with his permission on his own, because I couldn't return from Marrakesh so quickly, and had a very long meeting with him, which he saw as very positive. And I always made sure that when a meeting was going to take place, I would write to the official in the first instance, setting out the reason for the meeting. So I have written confirmation of all those meetings. And then we went back, wrote to the Diwan and said that we hadn't been able to make arrangements for the dogs, but that was ongoing, because he had said to us, as soon as we could find accommodation for all those animals, he would support us to remove the whole lot on one day. And he didn't want us to advertise that widely, because clearly if we went, we would go with the gendarmerie, and we didn't want advance warning, so there might be difficulties on the day. We just wanted to go and take them. So we wrote recently and said we would clearly like to take the equines on World Donkey Day, but hadn't been able to make arrangements for all the dogs. And the response we got was that was fine. We were to see the Qaid for authorization, and therefore my manager Ayub, who speaks Arabic, was able to speak to the Qaid, and he made an arrangement for a meeting with him at 11 o'clock on Monday, and we were led to understand that we would see the Diwan on the same day. So what we had planned is we were prepared to drive down to Agadir, and bear in mind it's a 3-hour journey for us from here, and if we take the ambulance it's slightly longer. But we had hoped on the Thursday, which is today, World Donkey Day, that we would hire 3 very, very large trucks designed to carry horses, usually to the Fantasias. We would have professional drivers, and we would be able to fit 40 equines into those 3 trucks. I think it was something like 19 horses and 18 donkeys. So we arrived in good faith on Monday, and we met our friend and colleague Michelle, who has an association for dogs in the area, who had almost by accident, it doesn't matter why, she had been into the Wali's office that morning, and he was surprised he hadn't been told that this meeting was taking place. So I began to smell a rat. I'm always very suspicious. So Michelle was great. She said there's nothing more she could do that day, but she had other things to do and went and got on with it. Ayub and I stayed outside the Qaid's office because, lo and behold, there was no sight of the Qaid. There was a man there who appeared to be a runner between the Qaid and everybody else. The young men we usually met round there weren't there. We were there on our own. And I was angry. And this person came out to see us, and we were in the ambulance. He was leaning into the ambulance and saying in Arabic to Ayub, I was so angry. I was saying I was going to go straight to the wali in Agadir, who is even more senior. And he was begging us not to do that because it might upset the Diwan. And he was putting a lot of pressure on Ayub. And of course, that didn't cut any mustard with me. It resulted in me saying, I don't come down here on a wasted journey to be treated like this. And it all seemed very, very suspicious. So I slammed the ambulance door and we went off then to meet a friend of ours and of Ayub's who was in the Agadir region, and his sister had prepared lunch for us. So we had lunch with this Moroccan family who said to me that they knew of Fanny and Lucy, and they said, what you're doing is absolutely right. They said, you know, you have the courage to say it and it has to be said. And I felt quite supported by them. We saw Michelle again because we had to drop off a box with her and collect another donkey that we had left there to rest until we could get down with the ambulance. And we came home. We came home thoroughly exhausted. Ayub was so angry, he kept saying to me, I feel so tired. I can hardly drive. I'm so tired. I'm tired because I'm angry. And I know how he felt. And he kept saying to me, this isn't right. He said, I always felt there was something wrong in that area. So I came home and made the decision that I had to tell my supporters, because I promised that something was going to happen on World Donkey Day. They had the right to know. So I reported on my social media that we'd hoped to pick up the donkeys and the horses that day, but had been unable to do so because unfortunately the officials we were going to meet weren't present. And then I had a raft of emails from people for which I'm so grateful to, and vets. I'm not going to, I will preserve their anonymity until I have permission and they're happy to be named. But they went along very much. There were a couple from people who live there and said, this part of the world is very dark. There has always been so much corruption here. And I was being told by people that Fanny and Lucy, people had been frightened of them because they're quite convinced that they gave money to the gendarmerie and officials. That's why they had got away with it for so long before central government intervened and the deportations were authorised. I got many emails like that. I got emails to tell me that when they lived there, that they lived very well off the charity. They were often seen drinking and partying in the area. They paid for a Moroccan girl who they call their foster daughter. They paid for her to go to private school. And that was all paid for out of charitable donations. Now, I don't believe that should be allowed to happen without exposing it. So I'm going to say this. We have never had anything but support from central government and the people who are in charge of associations in Rabat. We have always sent our returns into them every month. They know every penny that is spent here, every dirham, every dime is all accounted for. It is impossible for anyone here to take money into their own back pockets because it's all recorded, accounts are kept, and they're sent to the government every month. Now, where I have received some criticism is that some people say, okay, it's all right for you to say that, but I don't see you out there shouting for the protests that are being made in connection with FIFA when it's being said that so many million stray dogs are going to be killed in Morocco before the FIFA World Cup. Now, think about that, because we are resident here. Everything we have left to Morocco, but that means we live here as well. And we have access to government officials and to other people. And people like me, who have associations here, have worked very hard behind the scenes to ensure that a new law is about to be introduced. And I'm very confident about that. We'll be able to tell you more about that in the next few weeks. And I think there will be a solution. It's easy if you don't live here or you still have a base in another country. So if you are deported, there's somewhere to go back to. It's easy to write petitions, to go public, condemn the government, actually without understanding everything that is going on. And we have to remember that we are of more value to the animals if we're here and we remain here and continue our work. If Charles and I were deported, which we could be, we're foreign nationals, what would happen to the 300 equines that we currently look after? Which doesn't mean I don't support the people who are opposing the killing of dogs in Morocco. Of course I do. But don't knock me for what I do and how I behave unless you're prepared to investigate and ask the right questions. So I continue to say that we haven't had difficulties at government level. What I've discovered is that there has been a lot of corruption in the area where MAA was based, and more information is coming out. And I now realise that will only be resolved properly with government support. I want to give you an example. I learnt very recently that there was quite a drug bust. I've heard that from several sources. Large camion going out of Tagazout in that area that eventually was stopped and found to be carrying a lot of hashish, but it had been through the police checks locally and nothing had happened. Well, I wonder why. There are very large back pockets in Morocco. I can promise you that the government is doing everything it can to fight corruption. So we must support them in that. Now, people may be saying to me now, but what is happening about the equines that I'm not able to take out today? We will all fight in whatever way we can to get to those equines quickly. The Prosecutor General in Agadir can give permission for it to happen like that, and efforts are being made there. I've already got a case in the courts. I realise now, with the help of some other people, that I have to access the people at government level who were ultimately responsible for the deportation of the two women. Why do I think it's so important? Because I think the scandal it has created is huge and very damaging to Morocco. Because not only were they keeping animals in appalling conditions, and we have photographic evidence, I have said publicly and been criticised for it, it was like a concentration camp. Now, what is a concentration camp? It's where you hold someone against their will and perpetuate suffering. And these animals were held against their will, and many of them suffered greatly. Alongside it, they were also fighting purportedly the local authorities, and I think some of them they were, and some I think were probably getting backhanders, but they were attacking the government for killing dogs in Morocco, so came over very much as the heroines who were prepared to take on Morocco. So be it. Where are you now? You're not in Morocco and you're not coming back. So those of us that remain will continue the fight properly and lawfully. It was a huge scandal that this was allowed to happen in Morocco. So I'm now saying, if people are prepared to hear me out, that what went wrong is, firstly, when they eventually did set up the association, they didn't comply with the whole law. They set up an association, but they didn't send their returns in every month. Now, they were supposed to do that, and the local officials should have made sure that they did it. That's the only way that you get accountability. But instead of that, they had people who should not have been on the board were on the board through no fault of their own. They didn't know any differently, but the local Caid should have known. So regulation is important because so much comes with regulation. And I'm a big fighter here for associations not only to be regulated, but for them to be checked regularly, accountability. We have a good relationship with ONSA in the local area. ONSA is the same as DEFRA in the UK. They're responsible for public health, livestock, and obviously it includes animals. They come here, they do vaccinations for me. They come regularly and spray our stables because they tell me however clean we are, however often we paint, parasites will bury into mud walls. So they make sure that they help us in whatever way they can. But the advantage of that is they can see what we're doing, and they would certainly report us to central government if we weren't running this place efficiently. That is true accountability, and that's what we must fight for. I believe there will be so much more happening next year. There is a limit on the number of animals you can keep if you don't have an association. Because if you're just allowed to take animals in and in and in, that's what happened to MAA. They maybe started off with the best of intentions. I don't know. I have my doubts, but you know, lots of people say they did. And of course it gets out of hand. There must be proper regulation. I'm sorry if this is going to upset the supporters of MAA, but I would ask them to look at the evidence. And whatever Fanny and Lucy might say, I think Fanny is very quick to criticise me, and they've always got an excuse. Lucy can be quite persuasive. I sent some food up there, you know, with personal money. I have a view that some of it went missing. It is denied, but I have evidence. And really, to stop the debate, I took that off my social media because that evidence will be investigated. So it's slightly irrelevant at this point of time. So other people say to me, well, why do they want to keep going in Morocco? This is what the local people have told me. In that part of Morocco, there is so much corruption. It was easy. They were getting money in from all over the world, and it wasn't being checked. It wasn't being verified. It was a good source of income. So in time, I promise you all, there will be investigations outside the country as to where some of that money went. Have a clue from something I said. The computer that the gendarmerie failed to take. Do they know where that information went to? Some people have had access to it. So this is not the end by any means. And I do this because I'm fighting for Morocco. I love Morocco. It's my home. We will end our days here. Everything that we earned our whole lives is here in Morocco and is here for the benefit of Morocco in the future. My children know there's no inheritance. They will always be involved in Georgia, but this will continue. That is why I'm saying what I'm saying. And anything I can do to help the authorities do the right thing, I'm more than willing to work with them. I hope you understand. I hope you understand my anger at times, my annoyance. But I hope you look at our social media today and see what we are doing on World Donkey Day. So thank you to everyone who's had the patience to see this video through. Goodbye for now.